Hello my fellow Total War players, Zaript here, and today in this video you will see no battles, there would be just me talking about Rome 2 as a competitive platform, so if you're not interested, I guess you may want to skip this video. And obviously there is a lot of different problems staying on the way of Rome 2 and Total War in general, as a competitive platform, but I want to focus on two specific points today. And here they are. First is that tactical scale and pace of the game is fairly small and slow, so it leads to fairly uneventful matches. And second point is that the result of a single battle isn't really representative of the strengths of the players. Now, while this second point dealt with by using best of 3, best of 5 and so on format of a match, first point remains valid. What do we do to make game more interesting? And obviously this criticism comes mostly when compared to other competitive strategy titles like StarCraft or Company of Heroes or maybe even Men of War. Compared to those games, in Total War there is, on a battlefield, I mean, in a multiplayer, there is no economy going on, like no transitions, and really micro-wise there is much less intensity. So how do you make it interesting for a viewer, and how do you make it interesting to cast? That's a question. Now, one of solutions is to use sort of a Dota-style faction draft. And obviously it will work for Rome 2 because it's a faction game. For Shogun 2 it didn't really work because there were pretty much one faction in Avatar mode. And even in classical battles there still were problems of faction picks didn't matter as much. But in Rome 2 faction pick matters a lot. Which means we can use it as something to add additional layer to a game, add faction picking, like faction draft. And to make it more interesting, we may make it a little bit Counter-Strike-like. And to explain it, imagine Counter-Strike. I'm not sure if you saw the matches or not. Me coming from Counter-Strike background, for me it's kind of obvious, but particular round, one separate round in Counter-Strike isn't really that interesting. You cannot make it a match in one go, because there is if you die, you die, and there is only 5 men in one team, so it goes fast. It could be eventful, but it's really short. It's not that interesting on its own. So what was invented, and it didn't come fast. The history of Counter-Strike did see a lot of different rules. So what they do is they play a lot of rounds with persistent economy. So how you do in one match, in one particular round, does affect your next rounds, and it adds this layer when sometimes you want to give up a round to get your economy better, to save up some money, not waste it on weak devices, to buy better devices next round. So what if we combine these two things to create some sort of a meta macro game for Rome 2? And I want to take a look at two particular tournaments and their rule sets. These two tournaments, they involve money prizes, so I will be looking at their rule sets and discussing them. First was one weekend event, mostly featuring YouTubers, so level was not particularly high by our standards, but finals were quite competitive in my opinion. But anyway, more importantly is that it was a short event which went over one weekend. And it had these rules. Each game, each player did pick 3 factions as his faction pool. Then they sent these factions to admin, who released them. So both players knew which 3 factions his opponent wants. Then each player banned one faction from enemy pool and picked one of two remaining in his own pool. So this is sort of a compromise to kind of limit players' choice, to make them think about enemy factions in a limited way, to build some sort of a strategy, then to somehow limit enemy by banning him and pick in his remaining factions. Very compromise in everything. And most important part of these rules is that there were no persistence between games. Analysis comes later. So let's take a look now at TWCC Fall Cup rules. So TWCC rules a bit complicated, but here's the thing about them. In a simplified form, you have 3 factions banned in a first game, then 3 factions in the second, and then 1 faction in third and fourth games. So each game, and these bans are persistent. So each game, faction pool gets smaller and smaller. More than that, you cannot pick same faction as your opponent in the same game, and you cannot pick factions that you already picked before. Which meant that it added this specific layer of constantly thinking, should I pick good faction now, or maybe I should keep it for later, or maybe it will be banned. There is a lot of strategy involved. So these rules do introduce faction picking strategy. So let's now take a look at positive and negative sides of two approaches. Scan and Intel Invitational, probably the best thing about it is the fact that if you make a mistake with your pull or with your banning or picking, it does not affect your next game. So all games of a match, they are absolutely separated from each other in this from this point of view. So you can adjust in the second game, you can pick other 3 factions and do something differently. So it really is suited for short events where people do not really know each other well. Negative side is obviously that it requires admin in each game. And another negative side is that in the end, why would you pick weak factions in your pool? So overall, you will see that players will slowly but surely pick only powerhouse faction pools. Pools with factions that can play in variety of different ways, which is very small subset of all factions. As for TWCC Fall Cup, well, obvious negative side is that it's complicated and it's not obvious at the beginning how it works. But it's only problem at the beginning. The positive side that I came to like over the time is that it adds depth and it really enhances this lobby game. Like when you sit in a lobby and players do pick and ban, I am as a caster have a lot to say about it. I can try to figure out why did they ban specific factions. How do they try to prepare next game where all counters would be banned and they will be able to pick faction that will have no counters. It really becomes important and I love it. The problem obviously is that if you make a mistake, well, you screwed. You really screwed, bans are persistent, and if enemy overpicked you, we may get a game of which isn't interesting. The game could be decided in a lobby if one of the players not smart with his picks and bans, which could produce fairly boring battles to watch. So here's the problem. I'm not sure how it will go further, but I believe that such a draft system really requires a long tournament when players actually get adjusted to the rules, they learn the factions, and you will not see huge mistakes by later rounds. So actually both lobby and battlefield are interesting to watch and spectate. And another obvious positive side is that people try to ban powerhouses, and in the end we see more different factions come into play. And even if they don't ban powerhouses, by the end faction pool still gets smaller and smaller. So anyway we will see a lot of different factions. So yeah, here 2 different rule sets. suited for different scenarios. And I can't really tell which of them is better. They do have their use. But I wonder if any of them could be enchanted. For example, I easily can see for Scan Invitational, I would go from 3 faction pool to maybe 4 or even 5 faction pool to make it more interesting, because 3 is really limited amount. For TWC, I don't even know. Like it's a bit complicated. It may be interesting to see if this system could be adjusted for best of 3 or best of 7. Well, best of 7 may be a bit too much, but can TWCC Fall Cup rules be adjusted for best of 3? I wonder. Still interesting to know. And as you see, I don't have any conclusive solution yet. I just wanted to discuss it with you. I wanted to show you how game could be enhanced. Even if separate battle isn't interesting to watch, much could be interesting. And this is where I need your feedback. I'm not sure if you watched it on my channel. I have playlists for both Scan and Intel for TWCC Fall Cup. I did stream games from both tournaments, and I'm interested to know opinion of people who watched them on YouTube and on Twitch. How did it feel? How did it feel as separate games on YouTube, or as a whole match with lobby discussion on Twitch? Was it interesting? Like, which of them was more interesting for you to watch? That's what I need to know, because without feedback, it's very little that we can do. So that's it. Pretty much video asking for feedback on these types of rules. What else? Well, for being so patient, for staying for so long, here a picture for you guys. This is my cat, who you hear sometimes on a background. And yeah, this is a dangerous creature. You don't want to meet him on a dark street, I guarantee you. Say hi. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you guys for watching, and see you later.